Antarctica. Unbelievable. Unbearable.
Beneath the 2-mile-high ice sheet of the South Pole sits a technology so advanced it defies conventional physics. For over a decade, we've been told the massive installations in Antarctica are purely scientific. But a former contractor with high-level access has just become one of the most controversial whistleblowers. He claims the ice isn't hiding secrets, the ice is the machine. What if the world's most remote continent isn't an icy desert, but the control hub for a hidden global network? Top secrets revealed or not. Let's look at the man who blew this door wide open, Eric Hecker. That's our man right here. Hecker isn't your typical internet theorist spinning tales from a basement. He's a former U.S. Navy sailor with a deep background in complex industrial systems. In 2010, his specialized skill set caught the attention of defense giant Raytheon. They selected him for a highly critical isolated deployment, working as a tradesman, specifically a firefighter and plumber at the Amundsen-Scott South Pole Station. Now, you might think a plumber just clears drains and tightens valves, but at the South Pole, the infrastructure is entirely integrated. To maintain the life support, heating, and fluid systems of a base sitting on a moving ice sheet, you need total access to the belly of the beast. You see the mainframes, you see the energy routing, and you see the structural anomalies that completely contradict the public brochure. Because of his operational duties, Hecker had unrestricted physical access to the facility's deep underbelly. What he found lurking beneath the frost changed his understanding of modern military technology forever. The crown jewel of his revelations centers on a massive, subterranean installation known publicly as the IceCube Neutrino Detector. The official story we've been fed for years is that IceCube is a passive astrophysics project, a collection of over 5,000 digital optical modules dropped into 86 deep holes melted into the ice, stretching across a full cubic kilometer beneath the surface. The scientific community tells us it's just sitting there, completely harmless, quietly waiting for ghost particles from deep space to pass through the Earth so it can map the universe. But as Hecker monitored the station's layout, the plumbing, and the staggering power consumption, he realized the math simply didn't add up for a passive receiver. A system that only listens doesn't require the sheer, terrifying amount of juice being routed into the ice. According to his technical analysis of the station's grid, IceCube isn't looking up at the stars. It's a massive, active, subterranean array. Hecker claims it is actually the world's largest directed energy weapon, deliberately built into the unique crystalline structure of the ice sheet. Because salt-free, ultra-compressed ice acts as a perfect natural medium for directing, focusing, and amplifying massive electromagnetic frequencies, the entire continent essentially functions as a giant lens. Hecker asserts that this digital optical module system can alter its state, shifting from a receiver into a transmitter capable of emitting targeted, high-energy bursts. These bursts can project massive power grids either directly out into the upper atmosphere to target craft, or channel them straight through the molten core of the planet itself to reach the exact opposite side of the globe. It's a dual-purpose tech, an invisible planetary shield and a long-range striker, completely hidden under the guise of an international peaceful science project. Hecker witnessed the infrastructure firsthand, documenting the high-voltage lines plunging deep into the ice shelves, far away from where the standard generators should have been feeding power. But how do you power a weapon capable of splitting the sky from the bottom of the world? The mechanical underbelly of the South Pole. You have to look at what's happening beneath the floorboards to comprehend how this operation stays alive. When we picture the South Pole, we think of a flat, endless desert of white with a few scientific tents scattered around. But Eric Hecker describes an entirely different reality. Beneath the snow lies a massive, multi-level industrial complex that functions more like a nuclear submarine than a research station. As a plumber and firefighter for Raytheon, Hecker's literal job description was to keep the circulatory system of this monster running. And when you are tracking pipes and high-pressure lines through the dark zones of a restricted facility, you start noticing things that the average tourist or visiting meteorologist would never see. The first thing that caught his attention was the sheer scale of the energy infrastructure. A standard research base needs power for computers, heating, lights, and kitchen equipment. You can run that on a few heavy-duty diesel generators. But Hecker discovered a power matrix that was wildly over-engineered. We are talking about massive, high-voltage conduits that look like they belong under a major metropolis, all routing straight down into the ice shelves. Hecker notes that the fuel consumption and the thermal signatures coming off the station's deep systems didn't match the output of the visible generators. There was an extra, hidden layer of juice being generated somewhere in the dark, and it was all being fed directly into the ice cube array. Why would a passive listening post need enough electrical power to light up a small country? It doesn't. Unless, of course, it's not just listening. Hecker quickly realized that the entire station was built as a cover story for a highly integrated, dual-use military facility. The scientists walking around with clipboards? Most of them are completely in the dark, genuinely believing they are just studying cosmic rays. But beneath their feet, the infrastructure tells a very different story. Hecker documented strange, unmapped maintenance shafts that bypass the main research levels entirely, plunging straight down into the deeper, restricted strata of the ice. In these restricted zones, the technology shifts from standard scientific gear to heavy-duty military hardware. Hecker reported seeing massive fluid-pumping systems designed to handle extreme pressures, systems that had absolutely nothing to do with basic station maintenance or melting drinking water. Instead, these systems appear to be part of an advanced cooling loop. If you've ever built a high-end gaming PC, you know that the faster and more powerful your processor is, the more cooling it needs. Now scale that up to a directed energy weapon built out of a cubic kilometer of ice. When you fire an electromagnetic pulse of that magnitude, the friction and thermal buildup would melt the surrounding ice sheet instantly if you didn't have a hyper-advanced, high-pressure coolant system balancing the temperature. Hecker was literally fixing the pipes that kept this weapon from melting its own launch pad. It's a beautifully sinister design, using the coldest place on Earth to mask the hottest, most intense energy emissions ever generated by mankind. Keeping the machine cool is only half the battle. What happens when they actually decide to turn this thing on and flex its muscles? Everything the world needs to know. When you look at how Eric Hecker maps out the active firing of the ice cube array, the implications skip past standard military tech and go straight into sci-fi horror territory. Remember, we are talking about a cubic kilometer of pure crystalline ice packed with over 5,000 highly sensitive digital optical modules. In the official science papers, these modules are listed as passive sensors designed to capture light. But Hecker's technical breakdown reveals a terrifying inversion of that design. Those sensors can operate in reverse. Instead of just absorbing energy, they can be pulsed simultaneously to project an aggregated, hyper-focused electromagnetic beam. Because the ice sheet acts as a massive natural lens, it doesn't just transmit the beam, it amplifies it to a staggering degree. According to Hecker, when they fire this thing, they aren't just shooting lasers into the sky like a standard movie weapon. Instead, they are manipulating frequencies on a planetary scale. The Earth has its own natural electromagnetic frequency, and by tuning the ice cube array to match or disrupt those specific wavelengths, the operators can achieve two terrifying outcomes. The first is targeting assets in space or the upper atmosphere. The second, and far more grounding, is channeling that raw, high-density energy straight through the core of the planet itself. Think about how a speaker works. If you blast a low-frequency bass note, the walls of your house start vibrating. Now imagine that the speaker is a cubic kilometer of weaponized ice, and the bass note is a hyper-focused, low-frequency electromagnetic pulse aimed directly into the Earth's mantle. Hecker asserts that when the ice cube array was initially powered up and tested at full capacity, the resulting energy displacement didn't just vanish into the ether, it physically rattled the tectonic plates of the planet. He specifically links these high-power calibration tests to a string of bizarre, highly localized seismic anomalies around the globe. The most chilling example Hecker brings to the table is the devastating 2010 earthquake in Christchurch, New Zealand. If you look at a globe, New Zealand sits in a very strategic geometric position relative to the South Pole. Hecker claims that during his deployment in 2010, the station underwent an unannounced maximum output power cycle. He watched the diagnostic grid's red line as an unbelievable amount of electricity was forced deep into the ice shelves. Shortly after this massive energy dump, Christchurch was violently rocked by a magnitude 7.1 earthquake, followed months later by a devastating 6.3 aftershock that leveled parts of the city. To the public, it was a natural disaster, but to Hecker, tracking the energy spikes from the plumbing and maintenance decks, it looked like a direct tectonic consequence of a weapon calibration gone live. The mechanism behind this is called tectonic weaponization. By firing massive electromagnetic pulses into specific fault lines, you can essentially lubricate or violently agitate the plates, releasing built-up stress instantly to trigger an artificial earthquake. It gives whoever controls the South Pole the ultimate tool of plausible deniability. You can completely cripple a nation's infrastructure, collapse their economy, or destroy a strategic target, and the entire world will just blame it on Mother Nature. No missiles fired, no radar signatures left behind, and absolutely no way to trace the attack back to a freezing research base at the bottom of the world. Hecker realized he wasn't just working at a base, he was standing on top of a trigger that could shake the world on command. But as terrifying as tectonic warfare is, the tech under the ice stretches way past the confines of our own planet. If you can bend electromagnetic frequencies to shake the core of the Earth, what happens when you point that unbelievable power outward past our atmosphere and into deep space? The off-world comms network. If you think tectonic warfare is wild, wait until you hear about the interstellar comms network. According to Eric Hecker, the high-energy infrastructure at the Amundsen-Scott South Pole Station doesn't just look downward into the Earth's crust, it also shoots massive arrays of data straight into the cosmos. Hecker claims that the IceCube facility functions as an interstellar communication hub. This isn't just about radio signals or laser beams, but a sophisticated, faster-than-light, quantum-entangled, or extremely low-frequency broadcast system. When Hecker was tracking the mechanical routing of the facility, he noticed that the transmission gear wasn't designed for standard satellite feeds. Think about how difficult it is to get high-speed internet in remote areas. At the South Pole, standard communication relies on a tiny window of time when old satellites happen to pass directly overhead. Yet Hecker observed heavy-duty data pipes operating around the clock at speeds that should have been impossible for that latitude. This led him to a deeper realization. The base wasn't relying on the civilian satellite grid. They were using a highly specialized, hidden system designed to transmit data to places we aren't supposed to know about. Hecker asserts that this massive setup allows for direct, real-time communication with what he calls an off-world fleet. In the world of alternative disclosure, there is a concept known as the Secret Space Program, a highly classified, multinational operation utilizing advanced aerospace craft that far surpass anything NASA puts on television. If such a fleet exists, it would require an immense, reliable, and completely secure command station to coordinate logistics, tracking, and telemetry. Antarctica is the absolute perfect location for this. Because of its position at the absolute axis of the Earth, it offers an unobstructed 360-degree view of space as the planet spins. There are no city lights, no commercial radar interference, and zero civilian oversight. It's the ultimate dark site for a cosmic air traffic control tower. But communication isn't just one-way digital text. This is where Hecker's narrative links up with old military research programs like the Stargate project. He claims that the station doesn't just broadcast data packets. It can broadcast consciousness and advanced auditory frequencies. The array is allegedly capable of transmitting what is known as voice-to-skull or V2K technology. This is an electronic warfare system that can bypass a person's ears and beam audio signals directly into their neurological pathways, making them hear voices inside their own head. Hecker suggests that this tech is used for high-level mind control, deep asset coordination, and clandestine operations across the globe. Imagine sitting in a lonely radar room at the bottom of the world, realizing that the massive cables running past your desk are carrying signals meant for spacecraft orbiting outside our atmosphere. Hecker's day-to-day plumbing maintenance frequently brought him close to the specialized telemetry enclosures that housed these advanced transmission arrays. He noted that the security surrounding these specific units was entirely separate from the standard base protocols. Military personnel, operating completely outside the civilian contractor chain of command, maintained strict guard over these junctions. They weren't protecting weather data or astronomical charts. They were guarding the literal communication hub of an unacknowledged global empire. This leaves us with a massive puzzle. Why build all of this under a frozen desert wrapped in a blanket of absolute secrecy? The answer lies in how the entire operation is structured from the top down. If you have a machine that can trigger earthquakes, communicate with secret space fleets, and beam signals directly into human minds, you can't just leave it out in the open. You have to build an ironclad cover story that the entire world will accept without a second thought. You need an international treaty, a handful of pristine scientific research papers, and an endless supply of freezing, isolated space to keep the truth buried under the frost. So, how does the global power elite keep a lid on a project of this scale without anyone blowing the whistle sooner? The unseen grid. To keep a machine of this scale hidden from the world, you don't need an army of guards, you just need a perfect cover story. That cover is the Antarctic Treaty itself. Signed by dozens of nations, it brands the entire continent as a peaceful, demilitarized zone dedicated solely to open scientific cooperation. It is the ultimate magic trick. Because the world believes Antarctica is a strictly regulated sanctuary for climate research and stargazing, no one thinks to look for a weapon of mass destruction buried beneath the ice. The scientists walking the halls of the Amundsen-Scott Station are the perfect, unwitting shields. They publish their papers, track their weather patterns, and genuinely believe they are serving humanity, all while sitting right on top of a hyper-advanced military grid. Eric Hecker's testimony pulled back the curtain on how modern power structures use extreme isolation to build what is essentially an unacknowledged breakaway infrastructure. When you look at the sheer scale of the energy anomalies he tracked, the specialized high-pressure cooling systems he repaired, and the unmapped conduits plunging into the frozen dark, a terrifying picture emerges. Antarctica isn't just an icy wasteland at the bottom of our maps. It is the central motherboard for a hidden global network. From this single geographic axis, the forces pulling the strings can monitor the skies, communicate with classified off-world fleets, and project devastating tectonic power to almost any coordinate on Earth with absolute flawless deniability. When Hecker finally brought his documentation and personal logs forward, presenting his findings to members of Congress during public disclosure hearings, it sent shockwaves through the alternative intelligence community. He wasn't speaking from rumors or secondhand whispers. He was speaking as an eyewitness who turned the wrenches and traced the literal blueprints of the facility. His story forces us to look at the entire continent of Antarctica through a completely different lens. The ice sheet isn't just a geographical feature, it is an active component of a planetary-scale machine. So what is the ultimate takeaway here? The truth about our world's true technological capability is often buried where the fewest eyes can see it. As the ice continues to shift and more insiders choose to speak out, the line between science fiction and classified military reality is completely evaporating. The infrastructure is already built, the power grid is fully active, and the machine under the ice is quietly running right now. The next time a major seismic event shakes the world out of nowhere or a bizarre signal is picked up from deep space, we might not need to look to the sky for answers. We might just need to look down, deep beneath the frozen crust of the South Pole, where the ultimate secret is still humming in the dark. The evidence is locked in, the blueprints are exposed, and the frozen secrets of Antarctica are finally coming to light. Whether it's a passive science lab or a planetary-scale weapon grid, one thing is certain: the bottom of the world is hiding a completely different reality. Eric Hecker's testimony is just the tip of the iceberg, and as the frost thaws, more of the truth is bound to surface. What do you think is really lurking beneath the South Pole? If you want to stay ahead of the grid and catch the next deep dive, hit that subscribe button right now.